You cheated. Jack looked at him with an expressionless face as he said, "Look at you, saying that I cheated when you cheated. You can clearly speak in Asamanian, but you had been pretending all along. So, I decided that I would play the game with you." After that, Jack ignored the guy and put his focus back on the role that he was playing at that moment. He went ahead and played the next place that the guy was talking in Niala. Nakawola Njik Keen Imbol Sinju Ta. Oh, Nivarye. Nalasanga Sana. Kanu. Nenyakana Imbol Nji. Sikin Luz Aluka Yi Mwelewa Ta. Hata Ni Imbola Esi Mwenya. Sikin Mumanye E Semenasya Ta. Tien. I said that I won't say anything. Oh, I have forgotten, I'm already talking too much. So, I'm supposed to say that I won't speak in a language that you can understand. Even if I say what you won't know what I mean. MMH. Ni Mbara Akaya Ako Kalingi Khe Hoteli Indi Eyi Valinganga Vashi Soaring Eagle. Akaya Ako Koriel Vashi Kwenya Anju wa Kuakula Amatika. Kanu. Akaya Ako Kawola Kachi Keen Kaku Yete Yu Kuakula Glazi Hoteli Matika. Lakini Vinju Sivya Chai Ulei Ta Kanu Vatala Vanju Vefwe. Alafu Emachinga Ikio Kyaola Eyindi. Kali Niala Kavanyola, Keen Vamike. MMH, I think that little guy was from a hotel called Soaring Eagle. That little guy had gotten the information that we were planning to take hostages. So, that guy came forward and said that he would help us in taking over Glaze Hotel. But, things didn't go well as they arrested our people. Then, those idiots said where I was. If I ever get a hold of them, I'll make sure to strangle them. Anju yu kuwakulinga akasi chefwe ata siatayi ta. Nuenya okucha mu province indi isla. Ya mashariki. Kuboda io. Emwilova. Kulanende enyumba engali ichumika kama uramu yi controli, kanu. Tien. Where we usually take our jobs is not even far. When going to the eastern province, on that border, underground, there is a big building that is used as the control center, so. Jack completed the translation after about 10 minutes. And since the proceedings in the room were being recorded, he didn't have to repeat himself over and over again, as Valnaro would simply go through the video to get the information that he didn't get. After he was done, he looked at the guy whose eyes were almost listless the moment that he had just revealed all the information that was supposed to be a secret. At that moment, the guy was regretting that he was actually getting so arrogant that there was nobody that could understand what he was saying. So, he had thought that this was a good opportunity for him to release whatever was in his chest. This was great secret that he was never supposed to reveal to another person. But now that he had someone that was willing to listen to him, then he was going to use the opportunity to say it all and free his chest. Furthermore, the person that was listening to him couldn't even understand. So, this was killing two birds with a single stone. Not revealing the information. Well, they couldn't understand, and he was going to be mentally relieved. Now, he was wallowing. He had never thought things through at all. Had he thought about the fact that Jack had asked for payment so that he could do the translation, he should have known that Jack could understand him. Furthermore, there was a recording, so, if they used the information that they had gotten, then the moment that they had gotten someone that could do the translation for them, they would surely find out what he was saying. Jack shook his head and looked at Valnaro as he said, "Let's get going to see this major that had me coming over here. Now that I'm in a good mood, I'll transfer the $1 billion that you gave me back to you. You guys are soldiers and there's no way that I'm going to take the money that was considered as your budget. So, I won't make you guys suffer for something simple like that. So, for the payment for my services, you can add to the request that you are supposed to help me on fulfilling according to the deal that we had." Jack stated as he began heading for the door. He had already received what he wanted. So, instead of making the lives of the soldiers hard, he could as well go ahead and ask for a favor later. What's more, a simple $1 billion out of the total $100 billion that he had received was nothing at all. So, he would end up getting $99 billion and a favor out of all of this. "Jack, that can't happen. I have already agreed to having the money given to you, so, there is no way that I'm taking that back. I'm a man of my word after all." Valnaro refuted as he followed Jack out of the room. The two of them left the bearded guy alone in the room, as the guy could only place his head on the table as he wallowed at his mistakes. Valnaro on the other hand couldn't accept what Jack was doing. To him, this was akin to Jack showing pity to him and the soldiers under him. There was no way that he was going to allow that, considering that they as soldiers had pride of their own to defend. Jack looked at him and said, I'm not pitying you guys at all. It's just that the money that I have received will do nothing for me as I have more than that money in the account that is still looking for a place to be invested. And I thought that it would be better for me to get the payment for my services by something that can help me in the end. Don't you think that my services are worth a lot more than money that would simply stay in my account? Valnaro thought about it and thought that what Jack said was true. So, he could only let out a sigh as he walked with Jack out of the dungeon that was cleaner than most people could imagine, then back to the parking lot. After that, Valnaro drove the car further inside after he had left a couple of instructions to his subordinates about what he was supposed to do. Jack had also left his contact information for the old lady so that she could contact him later on. After that, Jack stayed in the car and waited for the car to arrive at the destination. And not long after they followed the rough road, they got past another checkpoint. According to Valnaro, they had entered the territory of another company. But still, Jack cared nonetheless about that as he wasn't here to associate with the soldiers. He just wanted to know what the major wanted to see him for. After about 30 minutes of driving, they arrived in an area that had many buildings as compared to the ones that Jack had seen at the Ripper's Garrison 11th Company base. Not only were the buildings better looking due to the maintenance that they underwent regularly, they were even advanced. Jack couldn't help but wonder if he had really gone to another town or the garrison. After all, the way that the area was developed was no different from a town. Furthermore, there were soldiers that were moving around in their civilian clothing just like how Valnaro had dressed like when he had gone to pick up Jack only to change into his official military uniform when they were leaving his base. After getting out of the car, Jack followed Valnaro who led the way towards the middle of the military town, how Jack decided to call it. They went through another checkpoint before they entered the town. After getting there, they still headed towards the center of the town. And not long after that, they arrived in front of a mansion. It wasn't something big, just a moderate one. But still, it had a touch of art on it. It had a courtyard that was full of green. Valnaro walked to the door of the mansion and knocked on it. And not long after that, there was a sound of footsteps that headed their way from the inside. When the footsteps halted, the door was opened and an old face appeared in front of Jack. Well, although Jack was terming it as old, it was that of a person who was likely to be in his 50s and there were several strands of his hair that had already turned gray. All the same, he was neat, not only in the military uniform, but also the hair that was well kempt. The moment that the door was opened, Valnaro stood in attention and gave a military salute. "Good day, Major. No need for the formalities when you are in my mansion. That's something that you are supposed to do only when I'm on duty at that moment." The Major chuckled as he waved his hand to dismiss the serious attitude of Valnaro. He then gazed at Jack who was looking at him curiously. With a smile on his face, he greeted, "It's nice to see you in person, Jack." "It's nice meeting you, Major." Jack greeted back as he shook the Major's outstretched hand. "May I perhaps know why you wanted to see me?" he added after he released the Major's hand. "Straight to the point, huh? Anyway, come in and have something to cool yourselves down. After that, we can talk about the reason as to why I invited you over," Major said. He then led the two into the mansion. The mansion was just well organized from Jack's perspective. The living room had several couches, a table, a TV and a few artistic paintings that were hung on the wall. After the two of them took a seat, the Major went ahead and took juice from the fridge and poured it into the glass of the two. And as they began drinking, he began talking. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Major Alonso, the one that heads the 11th to 14th companies." "Let me introduce myself. I'm Major Alonso, the one that heads the 11th to 14th companies." Jack nodded. There was nothing that he was supposed to say to that. As such, he decided to continue waiting to see what the Major wanted to see him for. "So, the main reason that I invited you over here was simple. I have gone through your information, the one that we have gathered, if you don't mind. And, from the information, I came to know that you are an expert when it comes to fighting. I have also gone through the footages from the hotel recently. Although you were not visible in the video, I could still tell that you were the one according to the information that we received from the witnesses. So, from the way that you handled the attackers was so sublime that it impressed me to call you over so that I can give you an offer or an invitation. Jack, I would like to invite you to join the military as a captain. We will create another company for you so that you can lead them. But of course, all of this is only if you are going to accept the invitation that I'm extending to you." Major Alonso continued with a long string of words. Jack took another sip of the juice before he placed the glass on the table. On his face, there was completely no change in his expression at all. But that didn't mean that he wasn't surprised. To say the truth, He was greatly surprised, not by them asking him to join the military, but by the fact that they had offered him a rank the moment that he agreed to join their ranks. In the military, one had to use merits to get a higher position. And although there were those that used their fighting prowess to get the positions, that was only after they had stayed in the military for a long while. This was completely new and shocking just by looking at the expression that Valnaro was putting at the moment. The captain had definitely spilled the juice that he was just about to drink on his shirt. Although it seemed like something big to join the military and immediately become a captain, it was nothing but a bother to Jack. If he was going to have to spend a lot of his time at the camp, how was he going to enjoy his youth by spending his time with Celine? Furthermore, there was a fact that he would have to follow several commands of those that were supposedly his superiors. He wasn't ready for any of that. So, he spoke, "I'm sorry, Major, but I definitely cannot accept to join you. This will definitely compromise my freedom, and that is just something that I don't like. I'm a person that likes to be free, doing whatever I want. So, if I'm told to come over here so that I can start following what others are saying, that would definitely be the thing that I would hate the most." Hearing Jack's straightforward answer, Alonso sighed. He had expected this from a person that was a part of that group. So, he had been prepared. "I know that. But you know that you will have a lot of freedom the moment that you become a soldier. There are some things that can be said to be illegal if you do them right now. But once you are a soldier, even if you do that, there would be no problem as long as you show your badge. So, do you think that you can try thinking about it again?" Jack shook his head at this. "If I was the one that is commanding the whole military, then I can definitely join you guys. But, if it's someone at lower ranks, then forget about that." Valnaro looked at Jack with his eyes nearly popping out of their sockets. He had always been proud that he had been able to achieve the position of a captain in a military where there was a lot of competition. But, all of this was gotten through sheer hard work and dedication plus sacrifices. On the other hand, Jack was being offered the same position as him just so that he could join them. And that was not all. In just a few years, Jack would be able to raise his rank due to his abilities as long as he put on some effort. But now, Jack had just refused all of that and wanted to get a position of the commander of the whole military in the country. This was something that made him somehow angry. But all the same, he managed to keep himself in check because he was in the presence of his direct superior, a major. Alonso, on the other hand, although he was surprised, he wasn't the least angry at what Jack had said. He knew that it was hard to convince Jack to join them. But still, he had a few other cards that he could play with. He smiled as he looked at Jack. Then, he said, "You should know that this is an impossibility, right? That's what I was trying to imply. It is impossible for me to join the military. It's not that I'm a criminal or something, but I just don't like the thought of being under someone. I like being someone independent," Jack replied. Alonso shook his head as he decided that it was better for him to use the trump card. It seemed that the low offers would do nothing to attract the young man that was seated before him. "So, what about we make a compromise?" Alonso asked. "What compromise?" Jack asked with raised brows. "We can do this. You join the military, you maintain your freedom, but you can come and do something for us when we need your help. You can decide to agree or refuse to do that according to your convenience," Alonso stated as he locked eyes with Jack. Jack's brows raised again after hearing the offer. From what he could tell, this was indeed a good offer. But, there must be something that they wanted from him for them to offer something like that. Jack wasn't a fool to believe that they would just allow anyone to use the military name and badge to do what he liked but had no commitment to the country. That was an impossibility. "And what do you get in return?" Jack asked with narrowed eyes. Hee, don't worry at all. What we will get would simply be what you offer to us. When you agree to help us, then that's what we get. Furthermore, we are already getting something from you, the body strengthening solution. Although you are free to ask for something from us in the future, I'm sure that the price of the solution is higher than what you asked from us. The results that they have brought are enough to tell us that," Alonso replied honestly. He knew that for a person like Jack, there was no need for him to involve lies. He was supposed to come out clean and say it all to his face rather than hiding it. In case in the future he came to find that they were using him, they would fall out, and this would be something that they couldn't afford at the moment. Not only were the body strengthening solution that Jack was providing them important, but if he began giving them to the enemy nations, it would cause them a lot of trouble. So, he had to make sure that even if they didn't come to an agreement with Jack, at least they didn't have to be enemies. Neutrality was also an option to them. Jack thought through what Alonso had said. To say the least, the deal wasn't bad. He could agree to help them when there was a mission and he could refuse if he didn't want to do it. But then, there was something else that he had to ask. Will I still have to follow orders and so on? Alonso sighed again. He wondered what was wrong with Jack that he was simply refusing to follow another person's order. In the end, he could only relate this to his youth hot-bloodedness. In other words, youths were usually unruly and didn't like being controlled by others. You don't have to worry about that. Just like I had said it before, you will maintain your freedom. Nobody in the military will be able to order you to do something at all. It will only be a request and that's it. Furthermore, with your rank, you can command the other soldiers that are at a lower level from you. The prerequisite is that, whatever it is that you are ordering them to do is not to commit a crime or kill themselves. But you won't have soldiers that you would be leading at all. In other words, you would have a rank but no subordinates. All the soldiers below you in terms of rank can be considered your subordinates, Alonso stated. Valnaro, who was listening to all of this, was about to die from both shock and jealousy. Even he himself, a captain, he could not command any soldier that was a part of another company. Jack thought about it and questioned, what rank was I receiving again? Jack wasn't willing to get a rank that was so low that he didn't have that much authority at all. You will be given the same rank as the one that you will be a major as long as you agree to the deal. Alonso replied with a wry smile on his face. You will be given the same rank as the one that you will be a major as long as you agree to the deal. Alonso replied with a wry smile on his face. Jack thought and then asked, is it possible for my rank to rise higher than that? Alonso felt his lips twitching at the question that Jack had just asked. Just giving Jack the rank of a major was something that the colonel had decided on. He himself didn't think that it was all right for someone as young as Jack holding so much power in the military but having no restrictions at all. He could decided to misuse the power that was granted to him. But in the end, the colonel had insisted on that. In the end, the major had decided to mention that at the very last moment, his trump card in convincing Jack to join the military. But what was going on now? The rank that he had thought was too big for Jack. He thought that it was small and that he wanted a higher rank than that. He himself had to tire himself for over 2 decades in the military, going through several dangers, before he was promoted to become a major after serving as a captain for a decade. Still, he didn't show much on his face. He looked at Jack with an ambient smile on his face as he replied. Yes, it's possible for you to raise your rank and become a colonel. But that's something that can only happen when you have several accomplishments under your belt. In other words, if you want to get a higher rank, you simply have to take on a few missions and complete them perfectly. Once you have gained enough merits, you can be promoted to become a colonel. Jack looked at Alonso with a deadpan expression on his face. He could tell that the guy was trying to be sly. But that was something that he could easily tell. What Alonso was telling him was simple. Become more useful to the military and you will be rewarded by becoming a colonel, as simple as such. In the end, he simply shook his head. He still had a lot of missions from the system. Although it looked like he only had a single mission, which was to dominate 5 industries, it was something that would take a lot of effort to be completed. So, he didn't want to engage himself in other things that would take a lot of his time. Although he didn't like working a lot, he had no choice but to take things more seriously and work together with Denali so that the conditions could be fulfilled faster. As for the military rank, to him, this was nothing but a decoration to him. It wasn't like he was planning on using the authority that he had been granted anytime soon. In other words, he had decided to agree to this just as a precaution. Okay then. How do I get that badge? Jack asked as he leaned back on the couch that he was seated on. Alonso smiled before he clapped his hands. And immediately after that, the door of the mansion was opened and 3 soldiers clad in their uniforms entered the living room. Each of them had something that they were carrying on their hands. They each had a glove on their hands as well. And as they entered the room, they were matching as if they were on a parade. The soldier who was in front was carrying a black military uniform that was well folded. On top of it was a pair of military boots. The one that was following behind him was carrying something that looked like a badge that was placed on a velvet box. And the last soldier was carrying a small rectangular box. The contents of the box were unknown as Jack couldn't see through things, yet. After the 3 arrived in the middle of the living room, they stood upright and awaited for Alonso's command. Alonso stood from his seat. He then cast his gaze at Valnaro, who was seated on the couch with his eyes unfocused. The glass that he was holding in his hand was still half filled with the juice that he had poured him. In the end, Alonso could only shake his head. He understood that Valnaro was shocked. Well, he He wasn't the only one that had been shocked. He too had been like this, though a little better, when the colonel gave his decision on the matter that he had brought before him. He decided to let Valnaro be for the time being. He headed towards the 3 soldiers that were standing straight and still as if they were statues. He moved to the first soldier. He then had his expression turned solemn as he took the uniform from the soldier's hands. Then, he gazed at Jack and stated, "Once you receive the uniform, you will become a soldier." Jack understood the underlying meaning of Alonso's words. So, he got up from his seat. And although he didn't like being restricted by the military system, that didn't mean that he demeaned the soldiers or something. In fact, he had some kind of respect for them. At least till this day, he had never met with a soldier that tried harassing him. He faced Alonso and waited. The moment that Alonso stretched his hands to give him the uniform, Jack reached out both of his hands as a show of his respect for the soldiers. When the uniforms were in Jack's grasp, Alonso spoke. "From now on, you are a soldier. And as a soldier, I hope that you will fulfill justice for the country whenever the chance presents itself." Jack nodded in agreement. Although he was no saint, if there was an incident like the one that people attacked his hotel, he would definitely do something about it. But of course, that was on a premise that he won't have to lose his life. He wasn't ready to exchange his life for a person that he didn't know just because he was a soldier after all. He was still young and had a few more years to live. Seeing that Jack was nodding, Alonso smiled in appreciation. Then, his expression returned to its previous solemn self. The soldier who was previously holding the uniforms took a step back after giving a military salute. Alonso then went forward towards the second soldier who had already come forward. Alonso then took the badge that the soldier was carrying. It was oval in shape and was made or painted in silver. At the center of the silver medal, there was a scythe that was black in color. Then above it, there were 3 golden stars. These were just like the stars that were on Alonso's shoulders. This is the badge. This is something that you can use to show your authority when you don't have a uniform on you. And, in case you are wearing the uniform, there are 3 stars just like the ones that are on my shoulders. Make sure that they don't leave your clothes at all. That's because even I myself don't have the authority to change them. Only the colonel can do that for the majors and below. Jack nodded as he received his badge, to say the least, or looked cool. After receiving the badge, he pocketed it, causing the lips of all the soldiers present to twitch a little at how he was handling the badge. In the end, Alonso could only continue with what he was doing. As the second soldier moved back after a military salute, the third one approached. Alonso went ahead and opened the box that he was carrying. And inside it, there was a gun. To be precise, it was a pistol. Before Alonso could say anything, Jack spoke first. The Glock 19, a compact handgun. A handgun large enough to fill your hand. The weapon features a 4.02-inch long barrel, an overall length of 7.28 inches, a height of 5.04 inches, and it weighs a little over 30 ounces, fully loaded with 15 rounds of 9mm. It's smaller than most duty-sized handguns, like the M9, M17, and M1911. The Glock 19 is a good in-between size that allows it to serve as both a duty handgun and a concealable firearm. The Glock 19 is just right in the size department for a multi-mission role. When Jack gave the brief introduction of the gun, all the soldiers in the room looked at him with surprise clear in their eyes. But Alonso on the other hand managed to recover faster. He nodded. It was good that Jack knew about the guns and was not a newbie that would have to start training. As for where he learned about the weapons, that was something that didn't concern him at all. Jack was now part of their military. This in itself was enough that he wasn't their enemy. Additionally, although he had joined the military, he didn't have that much authority like the other majors. In other words, he won't be able to access some of the sensitive information of the military. In this way, even if he was part of the enemy nation, he won't be able to get any information that could be used against them. But if he was on their side as they believed, the better that he was, the good for them the moment that he took on the missions that he would be accepting in the future. Alonso handed the gun to Jack and said, "The gun is currently fully loaded. As for the ammunition that you would need in case you have used all the 15 rounds inside, here they are. This box contains 100 bullets. I believe that this should be enough, right?" Alonso asked as he handed a small box that contained bullets. Jack smiled as he replied, "This should be enough for now, I think. But in case there will be more attacks on my property, I don't think that they will suffice." Alonso ignored whatever Jack had said. Then without saying another words, He stood in attention and performed a military salute. Major Jackson. The three soldiers alongside Valnaro, who had just come back to his senses, did the same thing. Major Jackson. When Jack got back to his villa that evening, he was all smiles. He had just gotten an idea, and this idea would require the military's intervention. But that was something that would be coming up later. The darkness had already began descending alongside a light drizzle of the rain. It seemed that after a long time of no rain, the rains were planning on coming back soon as autumn zoomed in. As he sat in front of the dining table, Jack's smile never left his face at all. Even as he ate, he maintained this smile. He was simply thinking about the big earnings that he had gotten on that day. To say the least, he had earned big. He had already began using the system to the maximum limit that he could see, and due to that, he had managed to acquire some important things. First off, he took out his phone to check his bank balance. He hadn't checked his balance for a period of time now. Although he had been spending, he had also been earning a lot due to the system's aid by multiplying whatever he had gotten by 100. Flyer's bank savings account balance is $280,611,974,922. Jack took a deep breath. He was now having a lot of money laying in his account. It was finally time for him to spend the money to earn even more. Furthermore, the more that he spent, the more the chances of him getting the first income reward from the system. In other words, he had to set up several businesses so that he could earn more. There were projects that he could carry out as well. But everything was supposed to be taken step by step. Another thing that he had earned during the day's trip was the free skill slot that he had received from the system. He now had accumulated 3 chances that he could use to get any skill that was to his taste. But all of this had to wait because Jack had the intention of getting the skills at their most powerful level. And for that to happen, he would have to remain patient and only use the skill slots when it was a must-do. Then the last thing that he had gotten was the military rank. He had joined the military and had gained not only its protection, but also the authority. The protection that he was mentioning came in from the fact that he could now stop any police officer from arresting him. In other words, even if he went ahead and beat up a few ruffians that were causing trouble for him, there would be no issue. This had already made things easy for him as his training schedule for Celine demanded a lot of fights so that she could gain all the required experience. And although the fights were not the life and death ones, Jack thought that it wasn't bad for her to acquire the basic fighting experience where there was a risk of getting injured. In this way, she could hone her fighting instincts alongside her fighting techniques. So, this was something that made Jack's smile not fade away for a good while. Once he was done with his supper, Jack decided that he would be resting early, so, after taking a shower, he went to bed and slept. Collins was still in the hospital ward. It had been a while since he last saw his parents. They hadn't called or done anything as of lately. This had made him frown because this was something that had never happened before. From the fact that he was their only progeny, his father and mother were always there for him when he needed them. But now, it had already been a week since they last met. He had already began feeling uneasy at the moment. Although his recovery was progressing well and this was what he had been looking forward to due to the fact that he wanted to get his revenge, he was now hoping that the recovery would take a while longer than this. He himself had already been in this ward for 2 weeks already. With the high-intensity care from the doctors added with the current level of technology, they had managed to stabilize his condition, thereby making sure that he would recover. But there was something that would remain, and that was the fact that he would remain a person who cannot have children. After all, the injury that Jack had placed on him was not easy to be healed. Now, he knew that the moment that the doctor stated that he was in a good condition, he would be taken to court. This was something that he could tell from the fact that the police officers were still present just outside his door. According to his previous estimations, his parents were supposed to have already dealt with whatever case was filed against him. Since the kidnapping and attempted rape were not broadcasted in the news, he didn't think that it would be hard for his father to deal with the evidence. So, he should have been left free the day that his parents were allowed to see him. But now, not only had they disappeared without any information, but they didn't do anything at all. What is going on? Could it be that they decided that it was not worth it to continue helping me out of the situation? But that doesn't make any sense at all. After all, I'm their only child, their future. Collins started thinking. Or could it be that they have decided to abandon me because I can no longer have children till a solution is found? If that's the case, then I'm going to make sure that I kill that son of a B*TCH and his B*TCH. Even if I go to jail after that, I would have already taken my revenge on them. Creak. At this moment, the door of the ward opened and a doctor wearing the normal white coat entered the room. In her hands was a file that Collins remembered all so well. This was the file that was used to monitor his recovery progress. The doctor looked at Collins and greeted, "How are you doing today?" Collins was brought out of his reverie as he looked at the female doctor in front of him. She was a beauty, a mature one. And, of course, Collins' lustful side kicked in as he ogled at the doctor. His undisguised gaze made the doctor frown. She gave up on asking about his condition and went straight to the point that had brought her here. She had been trying to keep up with Collins' behavior of ogling at her for a few days now, but she couldn't take it anymore. "From your silence, I can tell that you are finally okay and ready to be discharged from the hospital. You don't have to worry about the bills and so on because they have already been paid. So, you can be free to leave after you change from the ward clothes. Have a nice trip home," the doctor stated. Immediately after she was done, she turned away from Collins and headed for the door. The doctor's words brought Collins from his stupor. The moment that he recalled what the doctor had just said, he immediately felt that his world was crumbling. He rushed to get out of bed, but he injured himself in the process. He was still not yet fully healed as he still had to stay here for a while more, about 2 weeks more to be precise. He groaned in pain, but he managed to get a hold of himself as he shouted at the doctor who was already at the door. "Doctor, I'm not okay at all. I still need more time to recover." But no matter how hard he shouted, the doctor ignored him as she turned towards the 2 officers that were standing by the door and spoke. "I have confirmed that the patient is in a good condition, so I'm going to discharge him from the hospital today." The officers turned towards her before they looked into the room where Collins was staggering towards the door. Then, they cast a gaze at the doctor with raised brows. "Are you sure that he is already in a good condition? From the way that he is walking, he seems not well," one of the police officers spoke. "Don't worry about that. This guy must be pretending that he is not healed yet so that we can delay taking him to face the charges that are placed against him. Do you think that a doctor would make a mistake?" the other officer spoke. He was the one that had chased Collins' parents the other time a week ago. "Ah, that should be the case." The other officer also thought that this was the case, so, he nodded at the doctor and said, "Thank you, doctor. Just go through the required procedures so that he can be discharged. We will take him away immediately after that." The doctor, who was about to regret what she had done, finally calmed down. From the way that the 2 officers were behaving, it was obvious that they didn't care about Collins' condition at all. This put her at ease. So, she smiled at them before she nodded and left. She had to get rid of Collins as fast as possible. Collins, on the other hand, was despairing. What did he just see? He was still not healed, but they were claiming that he was good to go. He was pretending. This was not how it was. "I really am still not yet in a good condition. I still need a month, no, I mean a year before I can finally get back into a good condition," Collins shouted in a panicked voice. But his words earned him a glare from the 2 officers. Now, they were sure that Collins was pretending. After all, according to the doctor, there were supposed to be only 2 weeks at most that remained for Collins to recover enough to be taken to court. But it seemed that they had underestimated Collins' recovery speed, as he had recovered earlier than the time that he was supposed to. And now that he was claiming that he still needed a year more, it was obvious that he was trying to dodge the case that was upon him. Collins was trying to get out of the room to chase after the doctor. He still had to make sure that the doctor said that he wasn't healed yet. Otherwise, he was going to have to leave the hospital in pain, and at the same time, he would have to go to court without even meeting his parents. And without his parents' support, he would be sent to prison, that was for sure. But, he wasn't willing to go there without even doing his own revenge. That was just unacceptable to him. But the moment that he stepped out of the room, the 2 officers blocked his way. "You are not allowed to leave this ward. Otherwise, the moment that you try doing so, we will consider you trying to escape," one of the officers spoke. The 2 of them had been here for a whole 2 weeks. Although they were only there during the day shift, they also got bored by staying there for a long time. They were people who were used to venturing around the city during their time of duty. But now that they had been given a single place to take care of for whole 2 weeks, they couldn't let go of a chance that would allow them to get out of here. They would rather be given the duty of going after the ruffians in the streets, rather than standing idle at the door. Yes, they had been standing out there for several hours, just to keep watch over Collins. This had bored them to a bigger extent that they wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. To say the least, they were tired. Collins, on the other hand, couldn't accept the results that was before him. He waved his arms around wildly as he shouted, This is not acceptable. I am not in a good condition to go out yet. Aren't you the one who's forcing himself out of the ward? An officer asked in return. But they want to discharge me out of the hospital, Collins roared back. But you are trying to get out of the ward earlier than you're supposed to. This in itself shows that the doctor's decision is correct. So, young man, better get back into the room before we force you. And don't try pretending that you're still not healed after 2 weeks. The officer retorted with a sharp tone. In the end, Collins was forced to remain inside until he was finally discharged after about 30 minutes. And the moment that the doctor gave the documents that showed that Collins had been discharged from the hospital, the two officers smiled widely as they carried Collins like a sack of life-saving potatoes. Since the guy was pretending to be injured, the two officers didn't mind and carried him out of the hospital. They thought that this was a small price for them to pay as long as they were going to be freed from the duty that had been placed on them. When they got out of the hospital, they got into a car that was waiting there for them already. They had previously contacted their superiors to inform them that the suspect had already been discharged from the hospital and was ready to be taken away. Without wasting much time, they shoved Collins into the back of the car and followed him in. The car was immediately driven away a moment later. Although Collins was still resisting, there was nothing that he could do to compete against the two police officers, and soon, he was inside the police station where he was detained to await for his court hearing. The following day, he finally got someone to visit him. This person who was the lawyer that had been handling his family cases all this while. He was hired by his father to take care of his cases in case there was one. It is a good thing that you are here, Raphael. I have been waiting for a long time now. Get me out of this cell. And where the heck is my father and mother? Collins began shouting frantically as he looked at the lawyer who had just arrived outside his cell. Raphael was currently wearing a suit. But from the looks of it, the suit was quite dirty. It seems that he had been wearing the same suit for at least 2 days. His hair was messed up. His eyes had dark spots below them. This was another indication that he had not gotten enough rest for a long period of time. In other words, he was currently worn out. The moment that he heard Collins' words, his frustrations welled up. He slammed his fist on the bars of the cell as he shouted at Collins. Who the FCK do you think you are? Do you think that I'm here because I like it? Humph, you better not try talking to me as if I'm your subordinate anymore. I'm only here to inform you that your parents have been arrested. And they should be up in court at the same time as you. All the businesses under your father have been either sold off or have gone bankrupt. In other words, you are completely poor. Even a beggar is better than you. This is the last thing that I'm going to do. I am informing you about your parents' current situation because I'm grateful to whatever your family did for me. But that ends now because I have already done enough. This should be enough to repay for whatever you did for me. So don't come looking for me in the future because we are done. Raphael finished his ranting, completely ignoring the pain that he was feeling due to how hard he had punched the cell's bar. The moment that he finished saying whatever he had in mind, he turned away and left. He completely ignored Collins, whose eyes were currently almost lifeless. And true, Collins cared nonetheless that the lawyer had left. He was just thinking about what he had been informed. He was wondering what really happened when he was in the hospital. His family had gone bankrupt. Several businesses under his father had been sold. This was completely illogical to him. Even though he was not that serious with the family business, that didn't mean that he was completely clueless about it. He knew the situation of the family business before he was hospitalized. Instead of going bankrupt, the businesses that were under his father were supposed to be blooming right now. After all, his father had many connections that he could utilize to continue making sure that he soared at greater heights than the ones that he was currently in. But now, he had just been informed that all the businesses under his father were gone. Either sold or gone bankrupt. His father and mother were supposed to be in court at the same time as him. And to make matters worse, there was a fact that his family was currently poor. And knowing the information about bankruptcy, this was a situation where a business brought heavy debts on the person who was owning the business. That meant that his family currently had several debts that were supposed to be paid off. It was no wonder that Raphael had said that even a beggar was better than them. At this moment, Collins was experiencing more than just despair. He didn't know what to do or what to say. He could only sit on the floor as he stared at the entrance of the cell that he was locked in blankly. But what he didn't know was the fact that he was the real cause behind whatever his family had undergone. Had he not made his moves towards Celine, and incurred Jack's anger, perhaps his family might have been prospering the way that it usually was. At the end of the day, he had nobody to blame other than himself and the lust that he had. He failed to control it and it had cost him a lot. A price that he was going to pay for the rest of his life. Perhaps in his reincarnation, if there was, perhaps he would remember not to dare to do whatever he did on that specific night. Celine had been training for 2 weeks, honing her fighting skills and building her strength. She wanted to be ready for anything, to be able to defend herself no matter what situation she found herself in. She had been working hard under Jack's training. She never wanted to be a dead weight for Jack. That was a feeling that she didn't like. So, although she knew that she would not be as strong as he was at the moment, she was sure that she could help in the future. She was aiming to complete the training that she had been undergoing so that she could start training her mother and Faith as well. Though, if she found that it was hard to do that, she would simply go ahead and ask for help from Denali. On this day, she had left home and decided to venture around the city. It was on Saturday and Jack was busy with something. So, she had gone out together with Wendy and Angie so that they could relax. Celine, Wendy, and Angie had been planning their girls' outing for days. They were all exhausted from work and needed a break, so they decided to spend a day in the city, exploring different parks and playing games. The 3 friends met up early in the morning, their faces bright with excitement. They had packed a picnic basket full of snacks and drinks, and they were ready for a day of fun. Their first stop was a large park on the outskirts of the city. They walked along the winding paths, taking in the beautiful scenery and enjoying the fresh air. They found a quiet spot under a tree and spread out a blanket, unpacking their picnic. As they ate, they talked and laughed, catching up on each other's lives and sharing funny stories. They took turns playing music from their phones, and they even got up and danced a little bit, not caring who was watching. After lunch, they decided to play a game of frisbee. They took turns tossing the frisbee back and forth, giggling as they tried to catch it. They weren't very good, but they didn't care, they were just having fun. As the afternoon wore on, they decided to venture into the heart of the city, to a park that was known for its games and activities. They played a game of basketball, cheering each other on as they made shots and stole the ball from each other. Next, they tried their hand at mini golf. They laughed as they missed the holes and joked about who was the worst at the game. But they didn't let their lack of skill stop them from having fun. Finally, they ended the day at a skating stadium. They watched as several skaters practiced their skills or tried showing off. Furthermore, since the 3 of them were beautiful ladies, there were several people that tried hitting on them. But, since both Wendy and Celine had boyfriends, none of them fell for the boys here nor for their skills. As for Angie, she didn't care about them at all. She just enjoyed seeing them perform and that's all. As the sun began to set, they reluctantly returned to the parking lot and made their way back to their cars. They were tired, but they were also happy and content. They had spent the day exploring the city, playing games, and enjoying each other's company. As they hugged goodbye, promising to do it again soon, they knew that they had made memories that would last a lifetime. Celine didn't go out with her car on that day. The reason for that was simple: she didn't want to give up on the training that she was still undergoing under Jack. So, as the night zoomed in, she began taking a walk on the streets. She knew that night time was the best time that the gangsters would be out. So, she took out her phone and texted Jack about her whereabouts before continuing with whatever she was doing. She was sure that Jack was going to come. He had contacted her during the day before she informed him that she was spending her time with both her friends. In the end, he compromised that he was the one who was going to spend the evening with her, and currently, it was late 1700. It was almost dinner time and she had decided to spend that time with Jack. As she was walking, she made sure to head towards the areas that were the least populated. Those were the sides that the gangsters usually revolved around. So if she wanted to get the gangsters that she would use for training, she had to make sure that she headed that way. But even after a long while, she frowned as she had not met even a single gangster. This was quite unusual. But still, she continued walking, looking around. She wasn't worried that Jack wouldn't find her because he could track her location easily. She had made sure to leave the location on. As time went by, she began getting frustrated from the lack of the gangsters in the streets. She had already taken the body strengthening solution so that she could recover from the tiredness that she had faced when she was spending time with her 2 sisters. And as more time passed, instead of looking for those that were committing a crime somewhere, she had decided that she would fight whichever gangster she met. So, when a group of gangsters crossed her path after a long while, she saw it as an opportunity to put her training to the test. They were standing outside a nightclub, their faces twisted into sneers as they watched the people going in and out. Celine walked past them, her head held high, but she could feel their eyes on her. She knew that they were sizing her up, wondering what she was doing there. She ignored them and kept walking, but as she passed, one of the gangsters stepped forward and blocked her path. "Where do you think you're going?" he said, his voice low and menacing. Celine didn't flinch. She looked at the gangster straight in the eye and said, "I'm just passing through. Move out of my way." Celine didn't want to just attack them. She had to make sure that it was in such a way that it seemed that she was the one that was defending herself. And that was why she had decided to do whatever she was doing now. She was sure that these guys wouldn't let her go just from her beauty being exceptional, and from the fact that the darkness was already beginning to loom in. The gangster laughed, a cruel sound that sent shivers down Celine's spine. "You think you're tough, little lady? Let's see how tough you really are." And with that, the gangsters closed in on her, their fists clenched and their eyes gleaming with malice. Celine stood her ground, her muscles tense and ready for action. She had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it, and she knew that she was ready. The first gangster lunged at her, throwing a punch that Celine easily dodged. She countered with a swift kick to his knee, and he fell to the ground, clutching his leg in pain. The other gangsters hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Celine took advantage of their hesitation, delivering a powerful blow to the next one's stomach. The gangsters were tough, but Celine was tougher. She moved with lightning speed, dodging their punches and kicks and delivering powerful blows of her own. The fight was brutal and intense, but Celine didn't back down. She fought with everything she had, her mind focused and her body strong. The fight had attracted the attention of several people who were looking for entertainment. The moment that they saw that there was a fight, they decided that they could watch this. The gangsters tried to overwhelm her with their numbers, but Celine was too fast and too skilled. She took them on one by one, wearing them down and slowly but surely gaining the upper hand. The good thing was the fact that her abilities were above the average humans. She was about 3 times stronger and faster than the normal men. So, although it seemed that it was a difficult task for her, she was trying to restrict herself so that she didn't end up killing them. Her aim was to beat them up and not to send them to the hospital with several broken limbs. Although they were the ones that had come after her, she wasn't ready for such a fight yet. Though, she was sure that she would have to do it at some point in the future. But, that was something that she would leave for the future. As for now, she would continue with the fight that she was engaged in. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the last gangster fell to the ground, defeated. Celine stood over him, her chest heaving with exhaustion, her fists still clenched. She had won the fight, but she knew that she couldn't let her guard down. There were always more threats out there, always more people who wanted to do her harm. With a deep breath, Celine turned and walked away, her head held high. She knew that she had proven herself, that she was strong and capable, and that she was ready for anything, as long as it didn't involve guns. Well, the numbers as well. Celine and Jack sat across from each other at a cozy table in a bustling restaurant. They had been dating for 2 months now, and things were going well. As they sipped their drinks, they began to talk about their relationship and their future together. "So, where do you see us in the next few years?" Jack asked, his eyes fixed on Celine. Celine smiled. "Honestly, I see us traveling the world together, experiencing new cultures and trying new things. I want to see everything with you by my side." Jack nodded, his eyes shining with excitement. "That sounds amazing. And what about our future as a couple?" Celine took a deep breath. "I think we have something really special, Jack. I love you, and I want to build a life with you. But I also want to make sure we're on the same page about things." "Of course," Jack said, leaning forward. "What's on your mind?" "Well, I know we've talked about many things. But, Jack, I really love spending a lot of time with you. You have done a lot for me during the past period of time, and I know that I have been on the receiving end all this while. I would also like to do something for you as well. But, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do," Celine said, fidgeting with her napkin. Jack had given her the tin preservationists company that once belonged to Colin's family. That family had already been taken to court and had been sentenced, each of them at least 5 years of sentence. But of course, the 5 years were only for Colin's mother. As for Collins and his father, each one of them was sentenced to 20 years and 40 years respectively. Each of them had been found with several crimes that they had committed. All of these had been revealed by Jack. Collins was judged for both rape and attempted rape, kidnapping, murder and so on. On the other hand, his father was sentenced for tax evasion, kidnapping, murder, fraud in business and several more other crimes. Celine had gotten Jack's help when it came to the management of the company that he had given to her. Although all the decision-making was left to her, Jack was the person who was involved in the advertisement and marketing of the company. He had even go ahead to provide her with several finances that boosted the company and enable it to create several branches in different cities. This was something that was still undergoing and not yet completed. But of course, they had made sure to change the company's name so that they could wipe away the stain that Jack had smeared on it before. Currently, the company was named Emerald Food Canning. Now, it was not only involved in the meat canning, but also other foods that could be canned. This was something that was still ongoing as the changes would take some time to take effect. But with Jack's assistance, the changes and the expansion should only take about a month before the company was completely stabilized. Jack had after all used several media platforms to clean up the reputation of the company as well as to advertise it. You had made sure to make all the public informed that the company had now been acquired by another person. But of course, he didn't do the same thing as going forward to use the service that he had hacked previously to do the advertisement. He was sure that as long as he did that, he will be creating a lead for the cyber police to come after him. And since the company was under Celine's name, they would go after her and cause her a lot of trouble, which was something that he didn't want. Now, through Jack's help, she had managed to gain a lot. Not only in terms of the company that had handed to her, but also the shares that she had received from the Baldy, the 12% shares of the Rose Entertainment Company. She had also come to know that Jack had acquired all the other shares of the company. This had made that entertainment company one that was owned by the two of them. And although she only owned 12% shares, she was also a decision maker. This was something that Jack had emphasized on, the moment that he had informed her about his acquiring of the 88% shares of the company. And although Celine knew that Jack was serious about the relationship between them, she didn't like the feeling of being on the receiving end of everything. And this was the exact reason as to why she had been working hard during the training period. He had been intent on making sure that she would reduce the pressure that Jack was facing. This was so that Jack wouldn't have to be protecting her all the time. And perhaps she could protecting him in the future with the strength that she was currently having. Jack nodded understandingly. I think that I understand. But still, I don't want to pressure you into anything, Celine. I just want to make sure we're both happy and fulfilled. And to say the least, I'm happy with giving you whatever I can. So don't burden yourself with those thoughts. Celine smiled gratefully. Thank you, Jack. But although she said that, she was still thinking of what she was going to do for Jack. In the end, she finally came to a decision. Since she couldn't help him with the bigger things at the moment, then she would do the smaller ones. As their meals arrived, they shifted the conversation to lighter topics, laughing and joking as they ate. But in the back of their minds, they knew that they had a bright future ahead of them, filled with love and adventure. After the meal, the two of them walked out of the restaurant holding hands. After a meal together, their moods were lightened up. So, what do you think? Should we go around so that we can help the food get digested faster? Jack asked as he chuckled. Celine looked at Jack with a bright smile on her face. Although she had already fought before Jack found her, she was still willing to engage herself in another fight. All of this with the aim of making sure that she would not be considered as Jack's weakness. Furthermore, she knew that she had to develop some sense of independency because she didn't want to be so over-reliant on Jack. She had to create a life of her own. So, even though Jack would be present during most of the fights that would involve her, she would make sure to think that he wasn't there and there was a fact that she could be killed if she wasn't careful. And she appreciated the fact that Jack allowed her to be injured during the fights. This was a good thing that she loved about him. Although he was overly protective of her, he didn't dare to do something that would limit her progress or growth. So, the injuries that she suffered during the fights reminded her of the fact that she had to grow up, feeling the pain during a fight with something that honed her fighting instincts. A while later, Celine stood in the middle of a dark alley, surrounded by 10 ruffians who had been harassing a certain lady. She had come in at the right moment and saved the lady. The ruffians allowed the other lady to walk away after they saw how beautiful Celine was. In other words, they had changed their targets, leaving the other one for the best one. They smiled as one of them spoke. Since you thought that she wasn't good for us, I guess that you can accompany us in her place? Right, that's right. Since you came in and disturbed us, then you will just have to take the other lady's place as you are the one that had helped her escape. Celine hated whatever these guys were about to do the most. After all, this reminded her of the incident with Collins. That was something that she didn't really want to remember. The despair that she had felt at that time was tormenting to her. And now that she had chanced upon these guys trying to harass a female, she couldn't stand it at all. She took action immediately and kicked one of them. In this way, she had managed to gain the attention of the ruffians present. In doing so, the other lady had managed to run away. Of course, this was due to the fact that these 10 ruffians had allowed her to go. Otherwise, there was no way that she was going to escape from the clutches of the 10 people here. Although this was the capital city of Azima, it was also true that there would be no way that the dark side would ever be absent in a city that was ruled by humans. This was an ironclad rule that has existed for a long period of time. After all, humans did things according to their feelings, needs, and several other factors. As such, even the presence of the police force could not prevent the presence of the ruffians and gangsters in the city. At the end of the day, even the police who were supposed to be maintaining peace and order were sometimes the ones that were breaking it. As such, this side had to exist. Celine was not one to back down from a fight. She stood tall, her muscles tensed and ready for action. The ruffians laughed and jeered when she didn't respond to their taunting, thinking they had an easy target. They had completely forgotten about their fellow who had been kicked initially the moment that Celine arrived at the scene. That was just how they were, driven by whatever they thought they wanted the most. "Alright, guys, let's get her," one of the ruffians stated before he rushed towards Celine. "Alright, guys, let's get her," one of the ruffians stated before he rushed towards Celine. But Celine was not easy. As the first ruffian lunged at her, she dodged to the side and delivered a swift kick to his knee. He crumpled to the ground, and Celine turned to face the next attacker. The fight was long and brutal. Celine took on each ruffian one by one, dodging punches and kicks, and delivering powerful blows of her own. She was a skilled fighter, and her strength and agility were unmatched. The ruffians were no match for Celine, but they were also tenacious. They kept coming at her, trying to wear her down. But Celine refused to give up. She fought with everything she had, and slowly but surely, she began to wear them down. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the last ruffian fell to the ground, defeated. Celine stood over him, breathing a little heavily. This time, due to her anger, she had been making several mistakes during the fight. Sometimes she failed to exploit the chances that presented themselves to her in order to finish off the ruffians, and as a result, she had taken a lot of time as a lot of effort in order to take care of them. "It seems that we have a lot of work to do," Jack stated as he walked behind Celine before he gave her a hug from behind. Celine was startled by Jack's sudden appearance. She had not managed to notice him the moment that he came towards her before hugging her. Had it not been for the familiar feeling and scent that came from Jack that she had already gotten used to due to the long time that they had spent together, Celine would have attacked him immediately. She took a deep breath when she realized that she had done something that was against what Jack had taught her. It meant that she wasn't a good student. "I'm sorry, Jack," Celine stated from his embrace. "MMH? What for?" Jack questioned in confusion as he placed his chin on her shoulder. "I didn't do well this time. I'm sure that if you had been an enemy, you would have already dealt a big blow to me the moment that I lost focus after dealing with the other 10 guys," Celine replied in a low voice. She couldn't even believe herself. She had just sworn to herself that she would make sure to work hard so that she could make sure that she improved and wasn't Jack's burden. But now, had it been that there was another person that had come to attack her from behind, Jack would have been forced to come out and help her. This was something that she didn't want. She bit her lips in frustration. She really didn't know why she had lost her cool the moment that she saw the ruffians trying to repay a lady. It seemed that she was still tormented by the trauma of that night and she didn't even realize it. Just as she was still thinking, she felt something warm touching her cheeks. Her eyes widened a little when she saw that Jack had kissed her on the cheek. This was actually the first time that Jack had been more intimate with her. Other than hugs, they had done nothing else. So, it came as a surprise to her that Jack had decided to advance a little further than that. But all the same, she loved the feeling. She didn't hate the way that things were. If possible, she would have wanted him to kiss her more. But she was shy as the reddening of her face to the tip of her ears was a sign of it. It was just that since it was nighttime and they were in an alleyway that wasn't well a lot, Jack couldn't see that. "Don't worry about some things. I'm here with you, okay? I'm going to help you deal with the problems that you are having till you can finally stand on your own." Jack's voice reached her ears. "MMH?" Celine nodded as she responded while leaning back on Jack's chest. She made sure to make herself more comfortable in his embrace as she tried recovering from the fatigue that she was experiencing after the long fight. After a while, Jack spoke. "I guess that it's time for us to get back and take a good rest, don't you think so?" Before Celine could say anything, he had already carried her princess style before he began walking out of the alley. Just as he passed by one of the ruffians that had been beaten by Celine, He tried getting up. But no sooner had he raised his head than it was kicked by Jack. He had to vent a little as this guy had spoken *T about his girl. But other than that, he did nothing else to the unconscious guy. The moment that they exited the alley, Jack got into the Bugatti Veyron that was parked not so far away from there. Of course, the way that Celine was snuggling on his chest as he carried her attracted the attention of several pedestrians. But of course, Jack simply ignored them. After he put on the seatbelt, Jack drove away. "Should I take you back home or should I take you home?" Jack asked. "Huh?" Celine was confused by Jack's question. "I'm asking, should I take you to your maternal home or your future matrimonial home?" Jack rephrased his question. Celine blushed at that. From Jack's words, it was clear what his intentions were. He was planning to have her as his wife. And of course, she was happy about that. When it came to the relationship between the two of them, this was something that she was always more open to. She was willing to discuss it as long as it involved the future of their relationship. "I think I'll go to my future matrimonial home so that I can see how it looks like. Perhaps there is a chance that I can see the changes that will have to be made in the near future before I become a part of it." Celine replied with a smile on her face. There was a faint red tint on her cheeks. Jack's smile widened when she decided to go to his villa for the night. Although he had yet to build a mansion, villa or whatever house that he wanted to have as his permanent home, the villa could currently be considered as his home. So, he stepped on the accelerator and sped on the road. He overtook several cars while others opened the way for him as they were afraid that their car would scratch his Lamborghini. It was also at moments like these ones that Jack loved driving a car that was high profile. At least, it was efficient on the road. About 40 minutes later, he arrived in front of his villa. Since the two of them had already eaten dinner, they didn't waste that much time. They took a shower before getting snacks. What followed that was a good period of watching several movies that suited their liking. They hugged each other, laughed and commented on the movies that they were watching as time went on. To say the least, they enjoyed their time together during that night. And when the final movie ended at almost 1 a.m., the two of them decided that it was finally time to sleep. All the following day was going to be on a Sunday. That didn't mean that they were going to be free. The month of August is already approaching the end. It was already 29th of August. Just 2 days now and another month would begin. And just looking forward to the beginning of a new one because that was going to be the time that he was going to receive several rewards from the system apart from the income that he was supposed to receive. Although he wasn't going to get the first month reward like the one that he had gotten during the beginning of this month, he was still looking forward to the first income rewards of several companies that he had acquired so far. As for the other system reward, that would have to wait until the year ended. And at the time that the year would end and another would begin, he was sure that he was going to get another reward, better than the Glaze Hotel that he had received. Inside a manor several kilometers from Serenity residential area, a man with a dark expression was looking at the doctor in front of him waiting for his report. "Mr. Nathan, the young master will be waking up very soon. He should be up in around 30 minutes from now," the doctor stated. He was their private doctor that was hired by the Jezda family. He was the one who had been taking care of Arthur ever since he was brought back completely injured. He had not woken up even once, but now that there was a chance for him to wake up, Nathan wasn't going to let this just go. "Are you sure that there are no complications at all?" Nathan questioned. "There are no other complications other than the ones that we found previously. So unless there are some that we have not yet found, we will have to wait until he wakes up," the doctor replied calmly. "Okay then." Nathan nodded his head before he entered the room where Arthur was. When Nathan stepped into the room, he saw that Arthur was lying on the bed. He had been this way since the day that he had been brought home by the 3 bodyguards that he always took with him. The doctor who belonged to the Jezda family was the one who had tended to him during the previous weeks. And according to the report that the doctor had given, Arthur's condition wasn't life-threatening at all. But there was a single problem. It was for the fact that Arthur may not be able to walk again. In other words, he might have been crippled for life. This was something that Nathan could not accept. Arthur was his only son at the moment. Although he had 2 other daughters, they didn't have any chance at taking the position of the family head. Even though Arthur was someone who liked to play and didn't mind the family business that much, Nathan didn't care about that. Since he was not going to take the position as a family head, then at least his son had to take the mantle. If possible, he would have had his eldest daughter to compete for the position of the family head. But there was an ironclad rule in the family. There was no way that a woman was going to take the position of the family head. According to the ancestors who had said this rule, They had thought that if the daughters of the house inherited the position of the family head, then their husbands would find a way of controlling the whole family. So as to avoid the situation where the family and all its assets fell into the hands of another person who wasn't part of the family, they had decided on making sure that only the male children were going to take the position of the family head. As for the female, it didn't matter to them even if they were married or not. As long as they were women, they were not allowed. Nathan himself knew that his son was incompetent for the position of the family head. But what choice did he have? He was a person who was hungry for power. And by the position of the family head being held by his son, then he could control all the assets of the family. This was something that he wanted. In other words, he was planning to use his son as a puppet. Although Arthur was going to make the front as the family head, he was the one who was going to make all the decisions concerning the family. And this was the exact reason as to why he had been trying to restrict Arthur from doing anything that would make the old man of the family refuse to hand over the position to him. As for whatever trouble he caused out there, he had make sure to handle it well and hide it from the eyes of the old man. But now, there was a problem here. Other than the fact that Jonathan was back to the family after a 1-year period of his disappearance, Arthur had gotten himself crippled. This had gone ahead to limit the chances that he had for the position of the family head. Nathan himself had been trying to take care of Jonathan, trying to eliminate him from the competition of the family head. But all his efforts ended up in vain. Other than the fact that he had to hide his tracks so that they would track anything towards him, Jonathan was abnormally lucky. He had managed to evade several assassination attempts that he had made for him. And as such, all the money that Nathan had spent in hiring all the assassins was wasted. When he finally hired Spider, he had thought that Spider would take care of Jonathan. But in the end, Jonathan was back and his activities were now more fierce than they ever were. Initially, Jonathan was the person who had the highest chance of acquiring the position of the family head. And now that he had begun working even harder to ensure that his actions were noticed by the old man, then this was no different from him trying to cement his position as the new family head even before the selection was done. Although he was frustrated, Nathan could only swallow his anger and bitterness as he looked at his son who was currently unconscious. He knew that he had to make a move soon. He had already managed to convince the other people who were trying to compete for the position of the family head to back down. This was something that he had done during the 1 year that Jonathan was not around. When Jonathan disappeared without a trace, he had thought that perhaps his son would get the position of the family head. As such, he had offered a lot of benefits to the other competitors of the position of the family head. And then, he had allowed Arthur to be free for a while. But who knew that all his plans would come crashing down at once? Not only was Jonathan not dead, but even Arthur, the person that he had been trying so hard, so that he could achieve the position of the family head, was now crippled. He was currently sure that if Arthur did not manage to get back on his feet as soon as possible, then they could only wave goodbye to the position of the family head. Without him noticing, minutes went by and soon, over 30 minutes had gone by since he entered the room. He only came back to his senses only when he heard the sound of sheets moving from the side where the bed was. He looked towards the bed and saw that his son was finally awake. He was trying to move his arms around, but all his efforts were futile. Currently, Arthur was covered in all white. Bandages were all over his body, added together with the areas where his limbs were broken. So, it was quite a difficult task for Arthur to move his hands or legs. The only thing that could ever that moment was the neck that was spared. But even so, the head was inspired by the assailant. The person had made sure to beat up Arthur on the head. And as such, only the slits of the eyes, the nose and the mouth were left uncovered by the bandages. Nathan gritted his teeth thinking about the person who had done this to his son, his only ticket to the position that he had ever been dreaming of. Still, he managed to come down as he came close to Arthur. He then asked, "Who is the person that did this to you?" That is right, what Nathan cared the most about at this moment was, who was the person who had attacked Arthur. He didn't even care about his son's health at all. At the end of the day, he wasn't a doctor and there was nothing that he could do even if he knew that Arthur was in pain. Arthur was first confused about what was going on. He had just woken up from a long slumber and as a result his memories were a mess. And after a while, he had managed to organize these memories together before saying whatever he was thinking at that moment. A fake Jonathan. "What nonsense are you saying?" Nathan asked. He was wondering if his son had gotten confused after he was beaten up this brutally, or there was a game that he was trying to play here. The one that had beaten me up this way was the fake Jonathan. No, in fact, there were 2 Jonathans and all of them beat me up. Arthur replied in a frenzied voice. Previously, since he was the one who was on the losing end, he could only go ahead and receive the beating from Jack. But now that Yu was in front of his father, his only backer, he was going to tell the truth about what had happened on that day. He really wanted to get his revenge as soon as possible, and as such, he didn't even care about the retaliation that would come if he dared to attack Jack again. According to him, his father was invincible in the family. Nathan, on the other hand, was getting even more confused about the situation. He was wondering if his son had already gone mad after receiving the beating. He frowned as he thought of the solution to this problem. He had already asked the 3 bodyguards about what had happened to Arthur. In the end, those 3 gave him the same answers. They said that Arthur had told them to stay away from him for a while. After that, he had left. They, as his bodyguards, of course, wouldn't let him go away without protection. So, they had made sure to track his location and followed him closely. In the end, they had waited for a long period of time, but Arthur didn't even show up. So, they had decided to storm into the room that he was in. But what they found was a crippled Arthur, whom they took to the hospital directly, before he was brought back to the family manor. Since Arthur was unconscious at that time, Nathan had no choice but to wait until he woke up so that he could get the first-hand report from him. But still, he had made sure to keep an eye on all the 3 bodyguards so that they would not slip away. "Can you get serious and tell me who the hell injured you in this manner?" Nathan yelled at Arthur in both anger and frustration. "Can you get serious and tell me who the hell injured you in this manner?" Nathan yelled at Arthur in both anger and frustration. He wanted to know who it was that had dared to try ruining his plans. As for whether Arthur would get back to his feet or not, was not his concern at the moment. Arthur was surprised by the loud voice that Nathan used on him. This was actually the first time that he had seen his father being angry at him. Even though there were several times that he had made mistakes, Nathan had always been gentle with him. He had only been spoiling him since he was young. As such, this was a new experience for him. But before he could even think further about what was going on, he heard Nathan snorting at him. "Are you going to speak, or are you not going to talk until I get the words right out of your mouth by myself?" Looking at the cold eyes that were staring back at him, Arthur felt a chill running down his spine. He shivered a little before he hurriedly replied. "The one that beat me up was Jonathan. There were 2 of them at that time." Nathan looked at his son with a cold expression on his face. Presently, he was just thinking about what he was supposed to do. If it was Jonathan who was involved, even he himself had to be careful in whatever he was going to do next. After all the years that he had spent trying to deal with Jonathan, he had come to a realization that Jonathan was not someone who could be dealt with easily without having the family knowing about it. And since that was the case, then he will have to change his tactics. With narrowed eyes, he thought to himself, "Since you dare to lay a hand on my son, my only ticket to power, then let's play the game that you are trying. You think just because you are the favorite to win the position of the family head, you can be arrogant and do whatever you want? Then let me see how you're going to deal with that old man. At the end of the day, you are the one who broke the rules of the family." Immediately after making up his mind, Nathan turned away from the bed and headed outside the room. He was intent on having the family rules on his side. In this way, he could at least eliminate the most dangerous opponent that he was currently facing. Arthur, on the other hand, was surprised that his father was leaving immediately after he had informed him of the person who had attacked him. I couldn't help but think to himself that perhaps his father was incensed and that he was going to deal with Jonathan at that exact moment. But whatever he didn't know was the fact that Nathan had completely ignored the part where he stated that there were 2 Jonathans. According to Nathan's analysis, there was a problem with Arthur's way of thinking after a long time of slumber. On Sunday, Jack and Celine spent the day together. They went on to enjoy themselves by visiting several places that made them relax. On that day, Jack didn't have Celine undergo the training. He wanted her to relax as well. At the end of the day, the following day was going to be on a Monday. And as such, she was going to be quite busy with office work and so on. Although her mother and Faith had tried to free her from all these duties by working overtime, they couldn't handle the work from 2 different companies. After all, apart from the Angel's prominence, there was also Emerald Food Canning. Since the company was handed over to her by Jack, she had decided that she was the one who was going to personally manage it. After this was the reason as to why she was going to have a very busy schedule the following day. Jack wanted her to relax so that she could handle whatever she was going to do the following day easily. After all, there was still a lot of work to be done for that company. He himself was also busy. Although he had the help of Denali and Ayush, they were still not enough for the management of all the companies that were under him currently. Other than the two entertainment companies that he had gained recently due to the multiplier effect by the system when received the 10% shares of Kalman from Jonathan, there were still other companies that still needed him to take care of. But what he would be involved mostly during the following day was definitely the research and dealing with all those that had provoked him. He had to deal with them as soon as possible to relieve his mind of all the thinking that he had to do about what he was supposed to do to them. After spending the day together, enjoying each other's company, the two of them returned to their specific homes. Jack took Celine back to her parents' house before he went back to his villa. The moment that he got back to the villa, he took out his laptop as he decided that it was finally time for him to deal with another person that he had been delaying recently. He had left Arthur and his father off the hook for a good while now, so it was finally time that he began putting them in their places. As such, he had to get all the necessary information that he could get about them before he began taking any further actions on them. He would rather not start dealing with them, to only stop in between simply because he had failed to get a certain important piece of information. But of course, the main reason as to why he was putting in some effort into the research was simply because he wanted to deal with Nathan as a person and not the whole Jezda family. Jack was going to take over the entire Jezda family in the near future. Since the two of them were not enemies, then he would have to make sure that he doesn't affect him. With his current abilities, Jack believed that he could deal with Nathan, although he had the backing of the Jezda family. After all, although he was a part of the Jezda family which had assets that were worth hundreds of billions of dollars, that didn't mean that he was the one who was controlling them. Furthermore, the Jezda family wasn't that peaceful at all. In other words, there were competitions and enemies from every angle. Had it not been for the family rules that restricted the members of the family resorting to killing each other, then it was a sure bet that there would be several people that wouldn't see the lights of the following day. As such, Jack had decided that he would get all the information on Nathan. His allies and his enemies would be included in the list as well. He would use the enemies to destroy him. As for the allies, those he wouldn't care about as long as they didn't get involved. The reason as to why he wanted to deal with Nathan in this way was because he had actually been involved with the death of his mother. Or, to be precise, he was the real cause of his mother's death. And such a person was the one that Jack wouldn't spare at all. He would first make sure that whatever he was proud of was dealt with. And what followed that would be simple, he would have to face the same thing as the one that Anne had faced, death. After he was done with the research about all the information about Nathan, he would then start dealing with the lackeys that had been used by Collins to kidnap Celine. He had to fulfill his promise after all. Without wasting any more time, Jack began typing several codes on his laptop. And one by one, he began accessing the information about Nathan. He had already gotten various pieces of information about Nathan from Jonathan. So, the hacking and searching for the information about Nathan was something that Jack was able to handle easily. All the account statements, the text messages and the chats that he had been having for years, all the contacts that he had been having for a long time, all of them were unearthed by Jack one after the other. After that, Jack began looking into the deals that Nathan was involved. Either legal or illegal, he made sure to get all of them. With his speed and proficiency when it came to the utilization of the computer-related items, he was able to get all the information. All the contracts and so on were saved in Nathan's laptop. So, by using Nathan's email, he managed to hack into Nathan's laptop and got all the information that could be found there. Not only there, but even the phone and any other electronic device that he had used the email or his phone number on. Jack managed to hack into all of them and got the information that he had wanted. Now that we are done here, I guess that it is finally time that we start playing the game. Jack muttered with a smile as he looked at his phone. He could see that it was already 1 past midnight.